In this unit we're going to cover the use of phases in Revit. I just want to start off by explaining the concept of phases and where you would typically use them. So here is an existing building. This could be a house or an office. Now let's say in our project we want to extend this building. We want to add an extension onto the right hand side. We also want to demolish some of these existing walls, and we want to add a new wall in as part of our development. So how do we do this in Revit? Well, if this was AutoCAD or traditional sort of CAD package, you quite typically would draw out your existing like we've done here, then you would copy that, you'd make a copy of that existing plan, and then you would modify it. So let's say in AutoCAD typically you'd have an existing and a proposed next to each other. That is exactly what you should not be doing in Revit. Do not model the existing and then copy it to make your proposed. Because this is a BIM package, if you do that you will have twice the amount of walls in your schedules, doors, etc. This is where phases comes in. Now phases in Revit allows us to actually adapt the model over time. So if you imagine this project, at one point in time we have an existing building, and then at some point in the future it is modified, i.e. it will have an extension. Some of the walls will have come out and some will go in. So that's where phases comes into play. We can actually set those milestones in terms of points in time, and we can get our model to adapt at those various milestones. So if I just flick to the proposed plan, and don't worry, I'll show you exactly how all this works as we go through this unit, but this is just an example just to explain the concept. What you're actually looking at here in the proposed plan is essentially the same model that's been modified. We've got an extension to that model. Remember the room that was in the corner, that's been demolished. There was a cross wall with a door in here, that's been demolished. And now we have the addition of this internal wall and these double doors. Just flick back for a second to the existing plan to remind you of that. So these walls here are the same elements in the model database as are these internal walls. These were demolished, you remember, in the proposed, and there were some additions and an extension. So we can actually adapt the model to reflect the differing conditions at each milestone in time, and that's what phases are about. You can use them typically like this for existing and proposed. You can also use them for multi-stage projects or multi-phase projects. So if you've got a large development that's built in stages, let's say a school or university campus where you're building different blocks at different times, you can model that whole project, that whole development in one Revit project file using phases, setting those milestones at each phase and having your model adapt and extend and new blocks built at those various points. So that's the correct way to handle sort of existing and proposed and multi-phase projects. Please do not model your existing and then just copy it to represent the proposed. It's not the correct way to do it in Revit. So the first thing to do when you're setting up a phase project is to basically decide how many phases you need. So in an existing and proposed scheme, i.e. we've got an existing building and we're going to do something to it, we're going to extend it, we're going to refurb it, you typically just have two phases, the existing condition and the proposed condition. So to set up those phases you need to switch to the Manage tab, and on there you'll see a panel called Phasing and a button called Phases. Click on that and here is the phasing control panel. So you can think of phases as these milestones, these snapshots in time going from the past to the future. So they're in sort of time order. You'll notice they don't have any set dates. You can't set dates for these phases. The only important thing is which order they come in, or what order they come in, which comes first, which comes second. So you can see here for this particular project just have two phases, the existing and the new. And As I said earlier, you can use this for multi-phase projects, so sometimes you see this on education projects, so a large existing school where it's being significantly altered or refurbed. You may refurbish 2 or 3 classrooms, then you complete those, then you move on to, let's say, the admin block, so they're done in actual phases on site. You can replicate that in Revit by setting up those snapshots, so you'd have the existing, so that would be the school modelled before you do anything to it. Then you would have, let's say, stage 1 or stage A, stage B, stage C, right through to the final stage of completion of the project. All you need to do is include an entry for each of those phases, name them with a name that's meaningful to you. Quite simple when it's just an existing and proposed. Notice here, these are the default phases that you get in the Autodesk template. So if you start a brand new Revit project using the Autodesk template, you will find when you open this phasing dialog box that it already has 2 standard phases set up, one called existing and one called new construction. But feel free to rename those to add more phases. You can actually take phases out or combine them should the project change. But for now, we'll just work with the 2 phases here, existing and new construction. So after you've decided on your project phases and you've entered them into the phasing dialog box, which we've just seen how to do through manage phases and put them in the list there. After you've done that, there's only 2 real concepts to learn with regards how phases works in Revit. The first is the phase filter for each view. So let's take our existing view. So for every view in Revit, don't have any objects selected. Remember, with nothing selected, you'll get the properties of the view itself. Now if we look down at the bottom of the view properties, right at the bottom there's 2 parameters there to do with phasing. Now I'll go through both of these in detail a little bit later. But if you look at this bottom one here, phase, you can set on a per view basis what phase you want that view to actually show. So we've set up a plan view for the existing. I've called it level 0 underscore existing, so it's easy to pick out in the project browser which is the existing plan. Once I've created that floor plan view, I need to go into its properties for the view itself and make sure that that phase is set to existing. That's the phase I want to see. And if you click on there, there'll be a drop down and it will list the phases that you've entered in that phasing dialog box. So in this project we've only got the 2, existing and new construction. So leave that on existing. So that's the one concept, is basically taking each of your views and deciding on what state or milestone you want to actually see the project at and setting it accordingly in that phase parameter there for each view. That's view specific. So switch to the proposed, go down here. Now as you might expect, the phase in this one is set to new construction. So that's the one concept, and that is each view that you create, and it'll be the same for elevations, 3D, sections. You will see your list of phases in the view properties, and you need to decide for that particular view what milestone in time do you want to actually be displayed and set it there with the drop down. So we've just discussed the first concept with regards to how phasing works, and that is you need to set each view to show what milestone or what phase you want displayed. The second concept is each element in your model, in your database. Now if I'll take a segment of wall, each element has phase parameters, and there's 2, phase created and phase demolished. So for every single model element in your project, you can tell it when that particular element was created and when, if at all, it's demolished. So let's go to the existing plan. So as we've just seen this wall here, This particular piece of wall was created in the existing phase at that snapshot in time. Remember, it's picking that up from here. So you'll have a list of phases if you've got a multi-phase project. So that wall was created here, and phase demolished, none. At no point through this sequence does that wall ever get demolished, so it stays in the database even if we switch to the end of the project, which is the proposed or the new construction phase. It's still there because it's not set to be demolished. Let's take that wall, exactly the same. It was created in the existing phase and it's not set to be demolished. Now if we look at our extension, let's take a segment of wall there. Phase created, new construction. So this new wall was created in the new construction phase, the proposed. It didn't exist further back in time at the existing phase. Hence, when we switch back to this view, where we've told it we actually want to see just the existing phase, it didn't exist, so it can't be displayed, or it's being filtered out. So you can think of phases almost like some very slick filters which basically turn on or off the visibility of elements depending on when they entered that timeline and if at all they're set to be demolished. Let's go back to the proposed. So again, this new internal wall here, it was only created in the new construction phase, not set to be demolished. Just very quickly flick back for the last time to the existing, and let's take this room here. Now this was part of the existing, it was created back then in the existing phase. Phase demolished, it's set to be demolished in the second phase, the new construction phase. Hence when we switch to the proposed, it's not there. And that really is all there is to phasing. It is setting your views to show what you want to see, what snapshot or milestone in time. Remember, you just need to call up the view properties and set what phase you want to see, and then you need to set these parameters for your elements, when they were created and when, if at all, they were demolished. So we've just discussed the concept or theory of how phasing works. Remember that the two aspects. One is setting the phase created and phase demolished for your elements, and then there's setting your view properties to actually show the phase you need to see on a per view basis. So let's look at how this works in practice, how we actually add elements now into the various phases. So let's go back to the existing. Let's say that we've just remembered there is in fact another room in the corner here in the existing building. So let's go and add that now. So select that wall. I'm going to type CS for create similar. I'm going to pop a wall up there and add a door in. Okay. So if I take that new wall and we look at its phasing properties, phase created, existing, phase demolished. Now the question you may be asking is, how were those set? We haven't gone into that element properties. We haven't adjusted these. So where's it got that from? Well, quite simply, the phase created, it will inherit that from whatever phase you've got this view in which you're working, in which you created it, set at. Let me try and explain that a different way. So we've just added that wall and that door in this floor plan here, this floor plan view. So if I deselect the objects, if we take this floor plan, this is currently set to show the existing phase. So if we add any elements at all in this view, they will automatically inherit the property that they were created in the existing phase. It's picking that up from the view setting, which is a really neat feature, because once you've set up your floor plans for existing and proposed, as long as you remember to work in the correct view, you can do what we've just done here, is go back to the existing and sort of tweak the model, add extra bits in, and they will all be set to be created in the existing. by default, no element is set to be demolished. You have to go and override that and tell it if you want it to be demolished. So let's just go in and add another little broom cupboard here. So select that wall, CS, create similar, add that there, add a door in, and again automatically set the properties. Those elements are created in this phase, the same phase that the view is set to show. So conversely, if we go to the proposed plan, we want to add a bit more to our extension. CS for create similar. Let's put another wall across there. Let's make a small sort of draft lobby. Again, if I select the element itself, phase created, this wall was created in the new construction phase because it's inherited that property from the phase that the view is set to. So just watch out with that one. It's very easy to accidentally add elements to the wrong phase. So typical example, you've set up an existing and proposed, and you suddenly think, there was a further cupboard in the corner of that room. So no problem, you go to wall, add it in, add your door in, all done and complete. You go back to your existing and it's not there. That's because you were working in the proposed view, and that view had its phase set to proposed or new construction. That's where you added those elements, so they only came into existence at that phase, new construction. So when we go back in time to an earlier phase, they weren't around, they haven't been created yet. Now that's, if you do that accidentally, very easy to rectify. All you need to do, don't delete them and start again. Just select those elements in question. You might have to filter it out, and let's just take the door tags out. Right, so phasing is a common parameters between the door and the walls. So we can now send those elements back in time and say, actually, you weren't created in the new construction phase, you were created in the existing phase. Deselect. They still appear in the proposed plan because they weren't set to be demolished. But if we now go back to the existing plan, they also exist there because this is the phase in which they were created. We've just seen how we add elements to our models, the correct phases, and that is basically just to ensure that we are in the correct view that's set to the phase we want to add our elements. So if we want to add more to our extension or add new walls in as part of our proposed project, we need to ensure we're working in a view which is set to show the proposed or the correct phase we want. Likewise, we go back to the existing condition. Any elements we add here will be set individually to be created in the existing phase. So what about demolishing elements? So we just added these extra couple of cupboards in here in the existing. So we've said these are present in the existing building. Let's go back to the proposed. There they are, because they're not set to be demolished. But let's say as part of our architectural project, we do want to demolish these. They're to come out. So two ways of doing that. You can either just select the elements. Remember, we could actually fence those. Select the elements in question. Phase demolished, currently set to none. Go and hit new construction. So we're saying when we reach this point in time, this milestone, the proposed or new construction it's called here, we actually want them to be demolished. And there they go. Just to show you, they are still in the existing model because that's when they were created, and it's not until you get to the second snapshot in time, the second milestone, i.e. the proposed, that they actually get demolished out of the database. A quicker way to do it is actually use the Demolish tool. So if we go to modify, we get a nice big lump hammer there, Demolish tool. Click on that, and now we can simply go around our model and knock out the walls and the elements that we don't want. So we don't want that wall, and we don't want that one, and let's take out that cupboard. Now if we go back to the existing, let's just select one of those walls and look down here. Phase demolished, new construction. So all that demolish tool does is just set that phase demolished parameter to whatever the phase is of the view in which you're using that tool. So I was in the proposed plan. You'll recall that the proposed plan has its, just cancel out of there, has its phase set to new construction. So if I go ahead and use this demolish tool on any of these elements, all it's doing every time I click on an element, it's just setting, let's say for example there, it's setting that phase demolished from none to match the phase of the view in which you're using the tool. So it's just a much quicker way than me manually selecting the elements and doing that. So we've set up our phases through Manage Phases, listed them there in the right order. We've set up our views and we've ensured that our views have the phases set correctly to show what we want to show in each view. We've added our elements and we've ensured that each element is created in the correct phase and demolished, if applicable, in the correct phase. The only last thing to talk about in terms of phasing is phase filters. Now, if we take our view properties again, so we won't have anything selected in this view, we look down, we've seen that parameter at the bottom, phase, that's where we set what we want to see. But just above that, there is a parameter called phase filter, currently set to show complete. And if I hit the drop down, this basically allows you to apply some graphic overrides to your elements, because each element, as we've seen now, has its phase parameters set. We can do some slick things here in terms of exactly what we want to show on this view. Now, I would suggest that 95% of the time you're going to want show complete. Now, what show complete means is you're asking Revit to show you exactly what you would see for this project at this snapshot in time, at this phase. So if you were there on site in the proposed phase, i.e. when the project's finished, this is what you would see. You'd see the extension, you'd see the new walls, you wouldn't see the walls that we've taken out, that we've demolished, because they've gone. So it's showing the project complete as it is at that snapshot in time. However, you do have other options. So we can show all. You can see now we get all the existing. We get the elements that have been added in this phase, the proposed. We also get elements that have been demolished. So we get all elements in the project. However, it's still applying a graphical override to differentiate between the different ones. So you can see we've sort of got a half tone to the existing. We've got dashed line styles for the elements that have been demolished. And you can actually go in and you can control these graphic overrides. And to do that, you need to go into phases and phase filters. There's the list of options you've got in that phase filter drop down, and graphic overrides for each of those. You can set that dash style for demolished, for example, the colors. So you've got full control over how these different elements are displayed in their different states. But that's where you set it. And again, it's on a per view basis, and it's this phase filter parameter. Now, I'm just going to put that back to show complete. A really useful phase filter is a demolitions filter. So I've made a demolitions plan here. Typical plan in an architectural project where you're taking out internal walls, for example. Not quite neat to have a plan like this to show the builder which walls are being removed. So all I did was duplicate a floor plan, renamed it underscore demolitions just so we know what it is, and the phase filter in this case I set it to show previous plus demo. So the general phase for this view is new construction, but I'm applying a phase filter because I want now to show the previous phase, and that's what it's doing here in the half zone, and anything that's being demolished, and that's all I'm left with. So I've actually filtered out, although we're on new construction, I filtered out the walls that only come into existence in this new phase. So it's a really neat way of producing a demolitions plan. Now we've just worked with plans all the way through the unit, just to show you that this concept of phasing is applicable to all types of view. Here is a 3D view. So again, you can see everything there because the phase filter defaults to show all. So we've got our existing, our demolished in red, and we've got our additions there. So I can switch that to show complete. That's the final project. Show new, and it will just show everything that's just been added in this phase. So you can see you've got a lot of flexibility with phase filters with regards displaying each view to show exactly what you need to show. Just be aware that the default for phase filter is show all, so you will get things that are being demolished being shown as well. As I said, I would suggest that most of the time for each view you probably want to have that set on show complete. So for this phase, i.e. new construction, with show complete set as the phase filter, you will get the model representing exactly what the project would look like at that snapshot in time. I talked briefly at the start of this unit about using phases for multi-phase projects. Just want to give you a very quick demo of that now, just to show you how that works. So here's the project we've done so far with two simple phases, existing and proposed. First of all, I'm just going to go back into that phases dialog box. I'm going to rename that new construction. That'll actually be our phase 1 of the project. Make sure that's highlighted, and I can now insert another phase after that one, phase 2, and we'll do one more, phase 3. OK that. It's going to rename this proposed floor plan view to phase 1. Try and be disciplined and systematic in how you name your views when you're working with Revit, because you can imagine in a real project this project browser is going to start to get crowded really quickly with lots of different views, and you don't really want to sort of be wondering what each one is for or represents. So have some sort of systematic naming convention so you know what level they relate to and what they're actually showing. So that phase 1, I just double check that filter. Yes, the phase is set to show phase 1. Let's duplicate that, rename it phase 2. Now just remember, when you're doing this and you're duplicating your views, make sure that you go and change the phase as well. So we've created a new view, we've changed the name of it to show phase 2, but you can see because it was duplicated from that phase 1 floor plan, the phase is still set to show phase 1. You need to go and change that to phase 2. Do that again for phase 3. So duplicate, change the name of the view itself, but also change the phase for the view. So we've got floor plans for existing, phase 1, phase 2 and phase 3, all with the correct phase parameters set there. So there was our existing. Phase 1 of the project, we created an extension, we took a few walls out. So we'll leave that as phase 1, we're happy with that. So let's say in our real world project we've created this extension and we've moved some staff out of here temporarily into this part. Let's go to phase 2. Let's go and add some walls in. So we've now got a further extension as part of phase 2. So this comes down here, and let's do some internal walls. I won't put the doors in, but you hopefully get the idea. We've created another further extension. Let's say as phase 2, the staff of here now have to move out into this part because we now want to clear those internal walls and make this one open plan office. So remember that demolish tool, modify, demolish, do that, take that out. Let's go to phase 3, and in phase 3 we can now clear the internal building of all walls. That's one big open plan space. So what I'm trying to demonstrate here is that quite often you get architectural projects that, due to site constraints or the logistics of working in an occupied building, mean that you have to complete it in stages or phases. You might have staff or resources that have to move around. You might have temporary walls or hoardings that need to go up and be taken down. But you can model all that complexity and that logistics in Revit using phases. So we started with an existing building. Phase 1, built one extension. Phase 2, built the other extension, but now removed the walls that we've just put up in phase 1. And phase 3, we get the completed scheme. And this is all just using basically one model that adapts over time to those various phases. Fundamentally different than if you'd have started with the existing, like you would have done, say, in AutoCAD, and copied that and changed it. And then you've got to sort of keep track of all those different versions. Your scheduling would all be out because you've got far too many elements in the model. Phasing is the correct tool for the job to do what we've just done. If you want to explore different options in terms of design, so let's say for phase 1 you are considering an extension here, but you might also want to consider an extension on the other side, please don't be tempted to use phases to consider or to look at different options. I've seen people do sort of phase 1A and draw that there, then they've done phase 1B and put that on here, but had to demolish this so that it doesn't then appear as well. And if you do that, you will get in a real mess. As you've seen in this unit, phases are for elements to be created and demolished in a sequential order. If you want to consider options where you're either considering option A or B, for example, then use design options, and I'll be showing you that in the next unit. Please don't sort of mix it up with the use of phases.
And that completes this unit. To get the most out of this training material, please take the complete course online at bimscape.com. Here you will find a complete learning management system that allows you to work through the course at your own pace. Comprehensive written tutorials provide additional information to that found in the training videos. Mark each unit as complete as you finish it and move on to the next. At any point you can return to any of the units you have previously completed to go over the material again. If you'd like to take this course online, please visit www.bimscape.com/Revit for details.